that we want to encourage more clinicians of various sorts to be involved in education research. And what we realized quite early on is that lots of people are interested, but don't really know where to start with some of the basics. Maybe they're in a clinical situation where they're interested, got project ideas, but don't know quite where to go with it. And so that's where this series started. We are halfway through the series, but don't worry because all the previous sessions are up on the website and the slides and the recordings. So do have a look on the website where you registered for more information. And then just to say that it's a monthly webinar, and the next couple of webinars are really important. It's about qualitative and quantitative analysis in February and March, so really important sessions. So do sign up for those as well.
Everyone, my name is Doyin. I'm a GP and lecturer in medical education. I'll start talking about the topic. So my introduction into qualitative research was during my medical doctorate degree, where I conducted a research to find out how to enhance patient involvement in medical education. I wanted to know what patients felt about taking part in medical students training and what the barriers and facilitators are for them, and how to encourage and support them to be more actively involved in medical students training. So as part of this research, I conducted focus groups and interviews with medical students, patients, and a workshop with medical students, patients, and doctors. And that was a nice introduction into qualitative research because my background has been in quantitative research. So it helped me to understand the differences between quantitative and qualitative. So I would like to know a little bit about your experiences with qualitative research. So just you can write in the chat, but in the chat box, what experience you've had with qualitative research. So I've never done any qualitative research before. I'm planning to do one soon. I've done one, or I've done a few, and I know everything about it. Thank you. Oh, brilliant. We've got people from all over the world, all the way to USA. Thank you. You're all welcome. Yeah, focus groups, and you want to learn more, that's interesting. I have some tips and tricks here. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, nice to see you all, Laura, Hanan. And some have done some and semi-structured interview. Oh, yeah, Laura, you're going to the interview this week. Yeah, thank you. Right. So I want this to be very much useful for you, and please do, as we go along, if you have any questions, any burning questions. I know some people are about to run their focus groups and interviews, so you probably have some specific questions here. If you have any questions, feel free to put that in the chat. We'll keep an eye on that and answer that. If we don't have enough time to answer the questions, we'll go through. I'll be happy to send you responses later. So feel free to put that there. I have some learning outcomes for today. Next slide, please. Yes, so these are learning outcomes to describe what is required to conduct focus groups and interviews, to prepare a discussion schedule, describe the role of an interviewer or facilitator, and to distinguish between conducting interviews and focus groups. Next slide, please. So qualitative research differs from quantitative research because in qualitative research, you want to know more about people's perceptions, their experiences, their understanding about what you're studying. And in order to know these types of things, you want to get words. So text, images, descriptions of any sort that is not numbers. So that's how it differs from quantitative. Quantitative is more about getting numbers. Qualitative is more about getting words and descriptions. So in your focus groups and interviews are an example or examples of ways to collect qualitative data. And in order to do focus groups and interviews, you want to have a discussion with your participants to get that qualitative data. So what we will be talking about today is how to do that, how to get good, rich data that's going to shed a more nuanced understanding about what you're discussing. So in my case, I was talking about, or I wanted to find out about patient involvement in medical education. So we have 3 steps in conducting focus groups and interviews. And just before I talk about the 3 steps, I'll talk about the differences between interviews and focus groups. It's basically in interviews, you're talking to one person, your participant is one person at a time. So you have a one-to-one, dialogue with that person where you ask questions, they shed, they give the answers, they shed more understanding about what they're talking about, and it's pretty straightforward. Focus groups is also straightforward, but in focus group, you have more participants. So you're thinking about 6 to 12 participants in your focus groups where you're asking the questions and your participants are answering. Now, whilst in interviews, you have a one-to-one. So you speak to them, they speak to you back. In focus groups, you don't want to be doing the one-to-one, like speaking to each person back and forth like that. You want to encourage a dialogue between the participants, because it's during that dialogue you can actually understand how people's views differ from each other, and that gives you the richness and the depth of data that you want. So we go to the 3 steps now. We have the preparation stage, and then we have conducting the focus group or interviews, and then we have the reflection. Now, under the preparation stage, you want to prepare your discussion schedule. And in the schedule, next slide, please. And in the schedule, you have, so again, I like 3s. You might have got that out already. So in the schedule, you have 3 parts as well. So the welcome and introductions, the questions themselves, and the summary and the conclusion at the end of it. So in your welcome and introduction, it's basically the purpose of the introduction is to introduce yourself to your participants and let them know what your discussion is about, what your research is about, so that they can tailor their answers to match what your research questions are, so that it keeps your answers within the focus of your research. It also helps you to establish a rapport so that people feel comfortable to share their views. Because when you're talking about focus groups and interviews, people are going to be giving opinions that may not be what everybody perceives as the correct opinion. And you want them to feel free to give those opinions, because that's what is going to help you to understand that phenomenon even better. Importantly, you want to review the focus group information sheet. So it's basically a sheet saying what the focus group is about, and if they want to ask questions, who they can ask questions, and if they want to follow up afterwards, who they can follow up with. You want to take the informed consent. You will have taken a consent before to participate in the research before you come to the focus group or interview. And many times they would have signed that consent, but it's important as well during your discussion to take a verbal consent, because people might have changed their mind. They might have forgotten about the interviews or focus group or what it's about. Or sometimes as well, they've not really read the information sheet, so they didn't really know what they're there to talk about. So it's just another opportunity to take consent, verbal consent there. And for record purposes as well, because you are recording this interview and focus group, so at least it's also your recording as another proof that you've taken consent. And then ask participants to introduce themselves. More important, it's good for interviews because you want to know more about them, but particularly for focus groups, because it then helps them to establish that rapport, because they're going to be having the dialogue with one another. And also, I found it useful when I was doing I didn't find it useful because I didn't do that in the first one. So my first focus group, I didn't ask participants to introduce themselves. When I was listening to the data, I had to be trying to remember, okay, who said this, who said that? And then subsequently, I knew that it's important to do that, because when you do that, then you can actually juxtapose what is said to who said it. It's easier for you to do that rather than playing the tape 100 times, which is what I had to do eventually. Next slide, please. Now, the initial questions. So this is a focus group and interview itself. So in the initial questions, you want to actually think about what questions you want to ask during the data collection, that's going to answer your research question. So you have to put a bit of thinking to this so that you, at the end of the day, the data you get is going to be useful for your research. And things to think about will be, first of all, you want to start with some very general questions, open questions, about it, because that is going to give you a bit of context to then narrow down, the rest of the questions. So I started with something around, what has been your experience of being involved in medical student consultation? So I said, has a medical student ever been present in your consultation, either in surgery or in hospital? And then some of them will say yes. And then I said, tell us about that. So that's really like, just warming up, helping those people to warm up, because they're just saying things that it's simple recall. It's not more about understanding or opinion, is more like fact. So it's easy for them to say. So you want to start with something like that. Then, because of the answers to these questions, I already knew some of the experiences. I could ask questions specifically about the experiences because of that question. So just think about something easy and straightforward to start with. So if you're looking at maybe people's understanding of diabetes, you might want to say, do you have anybody in the family, or do you know anybody that has diabetes? Can you tell me about, what the experiences have been? Something like that. Next slide, please. Now, this is the meat of the focus groups or interview, the key questions, the main questions. These are the questions that are going to help you answer your research questions themselves. So, and when you are thinking about these key questions, the main questions, it's good to structure it, because that helps you to structure the discussion itself, so people know where you're going, what we're talking about now, and it helps them to answer the questions more appropriately. So for the structure, it depends on how you work and what you like. Some people might want to use something around chronology. So, for instance, if you are talking about experiences during general practice training, you might want to start with, why did you, choose general practice training? Then things around the induction, then things around support during general practice training, and then things around exams and exit, the end of your training or completion of training. So chronology sometimes helps you and helps the participants as well to know where you are in the discussion. Or you might be someone that likes to use themes. So the themes could be something around, it could be something around geography, for instance, or it could be something around events that have happened, recently. My themes were around my research questions, which were patients' knowledge about medical education, their understanding of their roles, students' roles in when they've been involved with patients, the barriers and enablers of patient involvement in medical education, the support patients have received or could receive to be actively involved, and consent practices. Now, under these themes, you now want to think about one or two or three questions under these themes to ask. And those questions are not questions that you have to follow rigidly. They're just questions for you to think about to get the discussion going. So you don't have to follow them in order, and you don't have to read the questions out verbatim. It's just really to remind you about where you are, because when people are talking, sometimes it's hard to listen, respond appropriately, and also be thinking about the next question. So those questions are just there as a guide. So for me, under knowledge and patient knowledge of medical education, because I had conducted questionnaires before my focus group, I had an idea of what they felt their knowledge was. And it was something around, patients have said they don't know much about medical education and training. What do you feel about that? And then they said, I understand, I don't understand, this is it. And my questions were something around, what kind of knowledge would be useful, or what would you like to know more about medical students and training, and how can we share that knowledge, or how can we share that information with patients? So under roles, my questions were, what have been your roles in medical students training when you've been involved with students, and what roles do you feel you can perform in future, and what support would you need to perform these roles? So so just thinking about those things, those kinds of questions for each of your themes. In structuring your questions, you want to structure them to start from things that are general first, because you get a lot of rich data. It's from the general things that you get a lot of rich data, because and it's interesting actually, data as well, because your participants can go in directions that you didn't think about. And that is what brings the richness to your data. If you go only, specific, then that means you're collecting data that is aligned to what you feel is important. And you might miss out some other things that are super important to your participants that would have helped you, understand that phenomenon even better. So general questions first, and then specific questions to understand more about that particular question or that particular theme. It's also important to go from positive to negative. And the reason being that people feel more comfortable speaking about positive things than negative things. So if you start from the more negative things or the more things that are more sensitive, then they might not even speak. You might not get a lot of data. And that's sometimes where you can see, like, interviews or focus groups like lasting, 10 minutes or 15 minutes because they've kind of closed up. They don't feel, they don't feel like talking about those things. So if you notice, even in my themes, I've actually arranged them from positive to negative as well. So, knowledge is straightforward, roles are straightforward, enablers, but enablers should have come before barriers. But yes, so that's an example. Support, and then consent, because consent is something that is more sensitive. That's why I put that at the last one, because then that's where, people can talk about, their experiences of consent and what they feel consent should be like, and, them wanting more autonomy, which will be things that people will want to say first. Next slide, please. Now, closing the discussion. In your closing, you want to summarize what has been discussed, and the summary will help you to check if that reflects their views or not. And it's actually useful for, checking and for validity of the data that you're collecting, because sometimes you may have misunderstood them, or sometimes you've understood them, but you've not understood them completely. So I will advise to summarize what you've heard, the key points, and then ask if this reflects their views and if you've missed anything. And it was interesting because one of the focus groups I conducted, at the end, where I said, is there anything that I've missed, or is there anything else that is important to you? Then one of the participants came up with very interesting data about, I can't remember what she said, but there was really interesting data about students. It was about students being keen to learn, and because students are very keen to learn, they might go the extra mile to research your clinical problem, which then makes patients feel, like their problem has been well looked after, but also establishes good relationships with patients. And sometimes as well, it can be a good thing for patients with a medical treatment, because they might actually suggest treatment or suggest approach to management, which the doctors may not have talked about. So that was really useful, and a key part of the research, which I wouldn't have got if I didn't ask anything missed. So just one thing to remind you not to switch off the recording at that last few minutes, because they're very important as well. So for me, I said, thank you for your time today. Is there anything important that I have not covered? And that's where I got that extra data from. And the other thing to think about is in the closing to think about other things that will be useful for the participants. So if you've talked about reimbursement of their time, then that's a good time to sort that out, because then they've gone. It's harder to do it when they've gone, and you want to do it straight after the interview or focus group as well, because they've given you your time, so you want to do what you've promised straight after as well. It's also useful sometimes your discussion might have brought up sensitive things, or sometimes your discussion might have brought up things that need flagging or need extra support. And this is the time you want to talk about those things. So you can give them if you want to signpost them, if you need to signpost them, then signpost them to the right places. Or if you want to offer extra support, then you can let them know that, they can send you a text or an email, so you can discuss this further. And it was quite useful. One of the interviews I had with students where, it sounded as if they felt they were not well supported. And at the end of the interview, was really good interview, very long interview, you would have imagined. And then at the end, then we had to start talking about, sources of support and everything. And I found that very useful because, you could see the relief at the end of the interview that, I have got some support and it's not just me saying things and not being heard. Next slide, please. So that's me talking about my experiences of interviews and focus groups. Just before we do the questions, I will talk about also, so everything I've said applies to both focus groups and interviews. Like I said before, there are little differences between interviews and focus groups. In interviews, you have a one-to-one, but in focus group, there's another aspect of running focus groups that is important, which is trying to ensure that there is a dialogue between your participants, because that's where the understanding of differences in opinions will come. And that's where the understanding about how understanding is constructed within the group. That's where you get the understanding from. So with your focus groups, you want to try, when people, if you ask a question, for instance, and someone answers, so person A answers, you don't want to be going back and forth asking person A only, and then go to person B and ask their questions back and forth again, and then see. You want to ask everybody what they feel about what person A has said. And that's where people, many times, they will kind of say they agree because people want to be polite. And then you can ask, does anybody feel something different? Or does anybody see this differently? Or has anybody had any different experience from this? Because usually the first person to speak has something positive to say. So maybe they say, oh yeah, I know a lot about medical education. I've been doing this a lot of times, and it's bread and butter for me. The person that knows nothing about medical education won't say anything because they're like, well, maybe I'm the one that doesn't know. So you want to give those people the opportunity to say. So you can say, has anybody had different experiences, or has anybody had different understanding of medical education, or does anybody? So that will help you to understand the differences in the group. Also, you want to moderate the group to ensure that everybody has everybody's voices are heard, and you have different tricks. Somebody talked about tricks and tips for conducting focus groups. So you have different tricks to do that. One of the tricks is the one I've just said, asking other people their opinions about something. The other trick is to try and spread the eye contact when you're doing the focus group, because that enables the other people that haven't been speaking to speak as well. Another thing you could do, and sometimes you have to think of other tricks to make people talk. So it could even be things like asking people to write their thoughts on a postcard, and then we can then discuss those thoughts together, because some people might not want to say things, and then if they write it on a postcard, then it's like, okay, now we've picked up this postcard, this is the next person's turn, like it's the turn of this next person to speak. And I find it useful sometimes to just be quiet in focus groups. I find it quite useful. Just be quiet, let them have the discussion between themselves, because sometimes you get some very interesting dialogue that you wouldn't have got if if you're always asking the questions and answering. And sometimes the other people will even, maybe disagree and then ask themselves questions, and then that's where you get the understanding from. Now, you have some people that will be very quiet, their nature, or maybe they feel uncomfortable in that setting, or maybe they're less represented in that setting. And the way to do that for those people is to say, thank you everyone for what you've said. I've not heard a lot from, XYZ person. Do you have anything to add to this? And it was interesting because my first focus group, one of the participants was not as represented as the other participants. They were different in a different way, in a certain way, and hadn't spoken. It was my first, right? So I didn't really know how to bring her in, but it was another participant that brought her in that way, and I stole it from them. I stole that from them, and then the only thing, and she started to speak from there, and that was good because we could then get representation from her own group or her own view in the research. So that's me talking about my own experiences. We've got 39 people here. So do we have any questions? Yes. Yes, sir.
What do you do if nobody's speaking at all? So I've had a couple of experiences, and in one of them, it wasn't my research, but I was just doing the focus group. And they were just very reluctant to speak. People would say one thing, and then I tried that technique that you said about what does everyone else think about what X said. Yeah, and it was just like drawing teeth the whole time. Have you got any other top tips for what to do when it's like that?
Thanks, Inga, and thanks. It must have been a difficult one because if you're the only one speaking, it's like, oh, it might feel uncomfortable. But can I ask you, was it one person? Did you have a few people speaking and then the rest were quiet, or is it everybody that was quiet?
Everybody was quiet. It was a group of year 5 pharmacy students, so trainee pharmacy students, and they were just really, really quiet. And I knew some of them, but not particularly well.
Okay, thank you. So a few things, I don't know what to say, whether it might be useful, but it's sometimes useful to reflect on why they might have been quiet. Did you have a feel of why they might have been quiet?
I think, if I'm honest, they didn't really want to be there. I got the impression that they might have been press ganged into coming.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that's helpful because any data you get is good data. And even when you don't get any data, it's also good data. So, so even if you didn't get, like you said, people didn't speak, that is good data for you because you now know for next time what could be done, to ensure that they speak. So a few techniques there, I would say. Then I would say a few techniques for the reflection, which was one of my tips, reflecting, because that will make you better. So for there and then, it might be a case of stepping back and going more general, like, usual things. Even sometimes not even talking. So I would say stepping back more and more and more. So, how we said general to specific. So you want to go even more general, up to the point that you might even talk about something different that's not your topic, just to get people talking. So, for instance, you said they might not have wanted to be there, and I don't know why. We don't know why, but let us assume an exam. They've just had an exam. Let's assume that could be one of the reasons. That you could just say, "Oh, I know people are quiet today, or people are not wanting to speak today. There were, you've had some exams there. How were the exams?" And then they start talking about the exams, and you bring them back in. Or maybe there was a football match, and they want to go for that. I'm just guessing. I'm just using examples. Or maybe something interesting has happened. An event has happened recently. It doesn't have anything to do with your topic, but it's just to get people talking. So just go out and then speak about that event, or if there's something you want to share with them, an event with yourself, just kind of talk about something else just to get them talking, and then you can say so and bring them back into your topic again. It's just like a general discussion, isn't it? If you've got, yeah.
That's
So that's what.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I didn't know how strict you have to be with the discussion schedule and the questions that have gone to ethics and things. I didn't know, is it okay to do that kind of thing? But that's helpful.
It is okay. The discussion schedule is just a schedule. It's not a rule that you have to follow. And even though you've gone through ethics, usually with qualitative research, they understand, and you would have written that in your ethical approval, that the schedule is just a guide, and we will discuss based on people's response. So they know that already so you can deviate from that. But of course, you are not going to, be talking about patient involvement. And then I would say, what do you feel about something that's like, what do you feel about Brexit? That, that's very different because sometimes, so you can deviate from it. The other thing I was going to share there and then is you can even do as much as writing, asking them to write, just write down something you feel about XYZ, or you can tell them to draw, depends on who's there. You can have a feel if it's children or if it is young adults, or you can ask them to draw, or you could just bring something up. Then there is also room, and it depends on whether they will gel with each other. There's also room to say, it may be that it's you, because you're a tutor, that they don't want to speak. So there's room to say, these are the things that I would like you to discuss. I can step out for a bit and I'll come back in to continue this discussion. And of course, you're recording it and they know you're recording it. And then I'll step back in, and then they start talking, and then you come back in. They have the questions, and then you come back in to take over, continue the discussion. So many things. But more importantly, for anybody, for any experiences, especially if it doesn't go as planned, is the reflection. That's where you really, get better. And then the next time you're going to do it, then you know what you can tweak to make sure that it works better. Lee, I think Lee raised his hand.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks, Doan, for the talk. My question is a bit on the other end extreme from Inga. So I'm just wondering, what if when I do the focus group interview and I keep it too general and they deviates too far off from the topic, how to bring them back without being too specific, as in I still want to keep it general, but with talking about the topic that I'm doing rather than them steering too far off. But I also don't want to make it too close, if you know what I mean.
Thank you. I had that in my first focus group as well. I have so many things from my first focus group. They were talking about everything. They talked about NHS. They talked about, everything in the world. So how to bring them back? That is where your schedule helps, because you have them as, a fallback question. Let them talk, because letting them talk helps with that rapport, and it helps. When they do all that talk, they bring in all the jokes and all the, everything else that helps you understand that topic more, like they're speaking in their natural self, not in a constraint, this is a formal setting kind of stuff. So it's really nice for them to. Now, if you want to bring them back, then you say, thank you very much for sharing your views about NHS, but I will be interested in knowing more about one of your questions. So you just go back to your question again and continue from there. And they always know, and they smile, and then they kind of come back again.
Dorian, thanks. We've got some great questions that have been are in the chat box. If you want to you could rest your voice for 2 minutes, and I don't mind answering the first one, and then you can add on bits afterwards. But all the questions we've got are great, so we'll try and cover them all. The one first, very fundamental question, really good question. So, how do you decide which is better, individual interviews or focus groups? So obviously we've lumped them in here together. So my first thought would be, it really depends on the data that you're wanting to collect. So the key part, which Dorian has discussed earlier on, is that a focus group is not a group interview. It's not, okay, we've got 6 people in one room, so it'll be quicker, and then I can ask all 6 individuals the question and get them to answer the question. I was actually in a focus group last week as a participant, and that's basically what happened. But that's not the point of a focus group. As Dorian said, the whole point of a focus group is to get the participants to be chatting together. Now, by chatting together, they will then stimulate discussion, particularly if it's kind of a topic where there might be different views. Then it means you can say, or a term we'd often say was, well, thank you, so-and-so, for your view. Anyone else got anything else to say on this in this topic, either different view or similar views? So you're trying to collate the views, but you also, as people talk about things, it stimulates other ideas and other thoughts, and then they think, yes, actually that the same thing happened to me, and they wouldn't have necessarily thought of that themselves. So if it's particularly if it's a research question around views and perceptions, for example, a common one that we've done in my context is asking medical students' views on something in the curricula, then actually having a group of them to discuss between themselves, with me as the interviewer speaking as little as possible, but get them to chat through, oh, that was really good. Oh, do you remember this lecture? Oh, no, but that was useless or whatever. It's a really good use of a focus group to discuss things together. If, on the other hand, actually you just want to, for example, hear someone's story or narrative or individual experience, then actually that's much better to do as a one-to-one, and not to be tempted by, yes, but if I do a focus group or group interview, I'll have 6 rather than 1. But actually, if it's an individual story and people's experiences, for example, they're probably better done as interviews rather than focus groups. Anything to add, Dorian, to that question?
That's good. I would like to add as well, if you're talking about things that you feel might be sensitive, then interviews are better because they might not want to express those things about in focus groups.
And to be honest, sometimes it does come down to pragmatics and feasibility, and the group that you're seeking to discuss, to chat to, whether actually it's going to be convenient or easy or even feasible to get a group of them together or not. Talking of which, feasibility and practicalities come up with the second question, which I'll let Dorian have a go at answering first, and I might add if necessary. But what would you change if you're going to do a focus group online?
Thanks. That's a really good question, because online virtual focus groups are getting more common since COVID. But actually, we've now realized that it is a good thing for us because it enables you to have participants from a wide geographical area. So the first focus group I had was in COVID as well. Online was in COVID. So we had to think about how to do it. The changes or the practicalities with the online is, one of the things that people struggle with is whether we want to have voice. Some people don't like the faces being recorded. So let them know that it's being recorded. Think about it, whether you do need their faces, you might not, in which case then let them know that, if you don't want to have your video recorded, it's okay. In the information sheet, let them know as well that you're only recording it for the voice, so they know that the pictures are not going to be saved and used on YouTube or stuff like that. Now, in online ones, another consideration is that some people might have issues with like network and connections, and just think about what will be your plan B if that happens. So it happened with me, and what I did was to write in the chat. So I said they should write in the chat, and then of course I can then speak about that if 1 or 2 people have issues with connections. Now, because online, you don't know the confidentiality with focus groups and interviews. You don't know what's happening or who else is in the room with other people. So it's better to set the scene, have some ground rules early on to say, people will be or might be saying things that are confidential, and we would expect everybody to not have, children and if or people around, really. Those are the things I'll do differently. Anything else, Hugh?
Yeah, I was going to say, they are harder to run, and I think going back to the point of trying to get the participants to discuss between themselves, that is always harder to do online, because as we're doing, what tends to happen with a online group is that you put your hand up, and then the person leading will say, yes, what's your question, and then answer, and then what's your question, answer. And you're trying to get away from just each participant speaking just to the researcher. So smaller groups, probably slightly easier, maybe even just not doing the hands up and just say, we're not doing hands up, just please speak as soon as someone else is finished, to try just any way to try and get the participants to chat between themselves. Otherwise, it really does become just a group interview where you as the participant are just asking the person each time individually the question. The next question there's a longer question in the chat box, and actually, Dorian, I was going to, if no one else had asked a question, I was going to actually answer this one as well, which is what about having a second person in the research team in the focus group? Does that help? Is it recommended? What should they do? What's been your experience of that?
So thanks. I feel personally, and I'll be interested to know what Hugh thinks about it, that it helps. It's really good because you've got somebody else that can be a co-researcher with you. So it depends. You have to think about it. You work as a team. So it could be that the second person is helping you as a scribe and helping to keep tab of what you've not asked. So at the end of the, if you finish one section, you can say, are there any things that you've missed out? So I found it really useful. My first ones, I had someone else there. It was really useful because they could, keep an eye and say, okay, you've not answered this question well, or you've not asked this question, sorry. So that's good. So they could either be a scribe, they could be a co-researcher, like helping you keep an eye on things. They could also help you with moderating. You know how we said sometimes people can be very quiet, then they might have some other ideas how to make, help people to speak. Or sometimes as well, if people are going out of too far out of the stuff, they can help you bring them around. But also Inga's question about people being quiet, you might want to think about your co-researcher being someone, and you have to think about whether this will work for you or work against you. You might want to have your co-researcher being someone that has better rapport with the group. So one of my workshops that I had, Hugh was there as a co-researcher in one of the workshops, and it was such an interesting data to listen to, having everybody laugh and talk about different things. It was so different if you didn't have somebody that knows everyone and has been working with them before. Again, you have to think about whether that might work against you because they might not want to say things around them. So generally, I think it's a good thing, but you want to make it work for you by ensuring that you work as a team.
Yeah, I would echo that and just say not essential, but I think it really does help, and particularly as in the question with student-led projects, I think actually having a second person there as a scribe, observer, etc. will be really helpful. So I agree. We will got another question which is slightly not related to the topic, but actually more about data analysis. But we will look at that. But just to mention before we do, if I know many of you here will have had experience and will have your own top tips. And after we've done this question, we'll probably finish off with a couple of slides from Dorian, including some of her top tips. But I'm just wondering, whilst we're looking at this question, if other people from their experience of running one or more have any top tips they'd like to share, just pop that in the chat box because it'd be really interesting. They can be very important and very unimportant. You can decide which of those my top tip is, which is just be careful if you're offering free food at the same time as doing a focus group. So the very first focus group that I was involved in, we had some funds, so we had a great it was a great meal. It was sandwiches and crisps. Crisps are really bad for picking up noise. So the poor person who was transcribing in the days that we sent it off for professional transcription had big problems trying to hear what on earth people were saying because everyone was eating crisps. So if you're going to give them a free lunch at the same time as the focus group, don't buy crisps. It's probably not the most important tip that you'll hear from today, but if others have got tips, then please do put them in the chat box. So the question, I don't know, Linda, are you there? Are you able to ask the question yourself?
Yes, hi there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, basically, one of the things that I've decided to do is not to do my own focus groups, but actually to get somebody else to do them because I'm kind of too close to the work, and I kind of it's almost I guess there's that social desirability effects and stuff that people say, you know, what they think I want them to say, because I've actually delivered the intervention to them and I really want the honest opinions. So I've decided not to do the focus groups myself. And then that made me actually think about the analysis of the data as well. And, you know, whether what's considered best practice there. Would it matter that I'm actually analysing this data that's very close to me? And, you know, is it best practice actually not to also get someone else to do that, or to even look at how I've analysed it and say, I don't quite agree, or yes, I agree. That's kind of where I was going with this question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes lots of sense. And again, I'll start off and then doing add things. I mean, you know, well, you mentioned it is qualitative work. So in qualitative work, we are a lot less concerned about bias, as long as we are open and reflective about it. So I've done lots of studies where I have, you know, vested interest in the topic, either because of a strong view or because exactly what you're saying, we're evaluating something that I put into practice, or I suggested and implemented. So I would say with bias, it's just being very open and honest and saying that this is, I do, and we should be doing that with all qualitative work, particularly reflective work. We should be saying, this is who I am, this is my background, and ideally this is my view on the topic, both before and after the study. And that's actually just part of, as I'm sure you know, Linda, just part of good practice within qualitative work. I guess with the so for the data analysis, I don't think it's a problem at all. And actually, there is definite advantages of actually having someone who's analysing the data, who is either a participant or is involved or has a view or is knowledgeable, because then actually your own views and your reflections on your analysis of the data can actually be data itself. As long as you're very open, very transparent, and explaining exactly your thought process and your analytical journey as you go along. Now, with the focus groups, I guess that's the one area where I could see if the students, you know, I'm probably not this, Linda, but you know, if you've just stood up and done a lecture and then running a focus group the next day to say, what did you think of my lecture? You're not going to get honest views. The only issue of, I guess, of analysing data that someone else has done the focus group and interview, certainly we do that all the time, especially if we work in teams. The advantage of doing the analysis of your own focus group and own interview is that the first step of qualitative analysis is immersion in the data. And if you were actually there and knew the questions, you could picture the person answering. It just gives you a head start, as it were. So it is harder then. You just have to listen to it more often, read it more often to be able to immerse yourself in the data. But I can see that if the participants know you and are very aware that you were involved in implementing something, then they but I still wouldn't say it's a definite no. I think it's more just be aware of your influence. But if you've got options and other people can do it, then that probably is ideal. But I think the analysis is not a problem at all for you to do it. I'll just check Dorian agrees or disagrees before passing over to you, Linda, to see if that makes sense.
I agree.
Okay, that was nice and quick. Does that make sense, Linda? Is that helpful?
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. It answers the question beautifully.
Fantastic. Dorian, I don't know, can you see I would maybe do the last question here from Natasha, or is that an answer rather than a question? So I haven't read it yet.
I was going to ask Natasha to say the question, then it's easy for us to.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Natasha, you here? Yeah.
Yes, thanks for inviting me to join. I really appreciated the last question, and it's something that I've kind of struggled with as well in running focus groups, that you're so involved or invested in a particular area when you're asking questions that you worry about influencing the focus group. But I think it also can allow for more in-depth probing questions As long as you're letting the participants do most of the talking and the discussing, you might have more insight based on just your own perspectives, your own experience, or the literature that you reviewed or previous research that you've run that can allow you to probe even deeper, and that can generate even richer discussion. And then, as Professor Alberti mentioned, I think as long as you address your own personal perspectives and potential biases, if you want to call it that, in your reflective analysis during the discussion of your work, I think that can be okay.
That's a really good point, Natasha. And actually, I suppose you would then question why using focus groups. Obviously, we do use them to evaluate educational initiatives, but actually, if it's was this helpful for your learning? Yes, no. You presumably do that through anonymous survey, etc. So actually, the whole point of doing the focus groups, as Natasha says, is to get the deeper, richer data and to actually explore. So you're going to be going beyond, was it good, was it bad, how was it for you, to okay, in what way has it, and then actually you having been involved in it is less of an issue. So thanks, Natasha, for that. And conveniently gives me another excuse to mention that next month our webinar will be on quantitative analysis, and then the month after on qualitative analysis, and that will certainly come up again then. And if you desperately need to know the answers or how to do that now, then as I said at the beginning, do have a look on the website, and last year's recordings and slides are up there if you need the answers straight away now. We've just got a couple more slides to show, Dorian. I think that's right, isn't it? If I'll get those up now.
Yes, please. All right. For those people that ask for tips and tricks, I have saved some Dorian's special tips for focus groups and interviews, and you'll be pleased to hear that it is not 3 now, it is 7. So prepare a schedule with your research questions in mind. That ensures that the responses you get are going to be useful for answering your research questions. That schedule is a guide. It's not a checklist of all the questions to be asked. You can work around it and go in the direction that your participants have chosen is important. And that helps you to get a better understanding of what they feel about the topic. And that takes us to the next one. Be prepared to be taken along a different path from what you have planned. And that's what makes the data interesting. Guide the discussion to ensure it's relevant to the topic. You want to ensure it's relevant and to reduce, veering off too much of that, but you want to strike a balance. So you want to have that sweet spot of letting people, say what they want to say, but also making sure that you are answering the research questions. So and that comes with practice, that balance, and knowing how much to bring people back and when to bring people back comes with practice. And going to the practice and learning, read and learn from published studies. So you've got lots of published studies where they've done focus groups or interviews. If you read the methods aspect, they tell you, the good practices that they've done and why they've done that. And then you can use that, apply that to your own study, and that can improve the strength of your study. And there are also published studies, which I'll share on the last slide, about how to conduct focus groups of interviews. And following those guidelines can help you as well. Think of it as a chat with a focus on the research question. So it's really like having a dinner with people and talking about what they feel about, something that's happened recently. And the only thing here is that you are focusing on the research topic. So you're not just having, in the dinner, you start with, topic A and you end with topic Z. Here you're actually centering around topic A. So you're having a lovely chat, enjoy it, but ensure that it's useful for your research questions. And finally, just do it. Don't overthink it. Do it. It might not be what you felt was, the best focus group or interview, but you can always reflect on it, because that reflection helps you to improve on the next one, and that next one is going to be better. And that brings us to the third one, improve. So you keep on improving, and eventually it becomes like second nature to you. Thank you. Next slide, please. So that's one of the papers that talk about how to conduct focus groups and interviews. Really good, because it gives you the steps and the important things of each steps, but you've got lots of them online as well. Thank you very much it was really interesting listening to your questions and answering your questions and the discussion that ensued from that. That's really good. Our next webinar is going to be on the 17th of February, and that's the QR code to register for the webinar.